Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Myrtle.
We're from Climate Pledge Collective, and this is a condensed version of our BankSwitch webinar, which introduces our BankSwitch campaign. The BankSwitch campaign, the numbers we're citing are from the Banking on Climate Change 2020 report, which was put out by Rainforest Action Network and BankTrack. And what you can see here is a list of the total investments by banks in fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement in 2016. What's shocking here is you see RBC has put $140 billion into fossil fuel, either in investments or in loans. But all of the big five Canadian banks are up there. TD, Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, CIBC is the lowest at $57 billion. So they're all up in the top 20. And they're smaller banks than some of the American banks. So as a percentage of their total assets, they're actually putting more money into fossil fuels than some of the American banks. The Banking on Climate Change report also looks at the policies that the banks have around fossil fuels, whether they have clear statements on global warming, whether they have a plan to phase these investments and loans out over time, and whether they have investments in some of the worst areas like fracking, Arctic drilling, coal. There's 200 points available. The best banks get sort of 59 or 82 out of 200, which isn't great, but the Canadian banks get between 3 and 0.5 points out of 200, meaning that they have absolutely no policies whatsoever around fossil fuels. They're willing to put money into fracking, tar sands, the Arctic, coal, anything. They'll do it, and they'll do it gladly. So that's why our campaign is trying to get them to change their policies. Even more than getting people to leave the banks, we want to pressure the banks to change their policies because getting that policy shift will have a bigger impact on fossil fuel lending than if we slightly weaken the banks by moving to credit unions. So we've set up a campaign that has you work with the bank as a current client who's willing to move your money and make a statement about that.
Another important aspect to this campaign is that it's an acknowledgement of our continued complicity in the funding of the destruction of Indigenous lands. So our Canadian banks continue to basically take away resources from future generations without prior consent. And they're doing this in Canada in order to forward fossil fuel projects, but they're also doing it around the world. So if you look at the BankTrack website, you can very easily see not only Canadian projects, but those going on around the world that we are continuing to help with because we are supporting our Canadian banks by continuing to access their services. So this is of course about people and not just lowering emissions, and we have to keep that in mind as an important aspect of this campaign.
In terms of the timing of the campaign, we think it's good because the banks are finally starting to feel the pressure. Maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they wouldn't even talk at all about fossil fuels, and they pretended global warming wasn't even a problem. But you see, last October, RBC announced that they wouldn't be financing certain coal and oil developments. But mostly this is just PR, because if you look into the details, they pledged not to make loans to companies that make more than, I think, 45% of their revenue from thermal coal. But a lot of the companies doing thermal coal are large mining conglomerates or large utilities who maybe make 20% of their revenue from thermal coal. So there's a lot of room still for RBC to keep pumping money into even coal, which is just, coal had to go like 10 years ago, not 5-10 years from now. And then TD also, they're starting to feel the pressure. They want to clean up their brand. They made a big climate action plan to clean up their portfolio completely of fossil fuels by 2050. In a way, this is a big deal because the banks have never said anything like this before. They never thought it was a problem as far as they were concerned. But the actual substance of the TD plan is very vague and weak. There's no comments about what they're going to do in the near future, whether they're going to keep making new loans even in the next few years. Because if they have a financial portfolio that's net zero in 2050, that doesn't matter so much if they're making loans today, because the projects that get money today will be built over the next 5 or 10 years, and they'll be producing fossil fuels maybe for another 10 or 20 years. So even if TD's portfolio is net zero in 2050, they might still be doing damage in 2050 with the loans that they're making in the next year or two. So as far as a statement, that's not nearly strong enough, so we need to keep adding the pressure. But it's important to note that they are starting to move on these things, so it's a good time to show them that we're listening and show them that we want more. So the way that the campaign works is that you contact your branch manager and you say that you will switch your money to a greener institution in April, perhaps on Earth Day at the end of April. One advantage of this is it's a little easier just to make one phone call than to move all your accounts. Another advantage in terms of the timing is that April is the annual general meeting season for the banks. They all have their big meetings, and they often announce new policy in the lead up to that time. And the big bonus, of course, is that if your bank does make a meaningful policy announcement in the next few months, maybe you don't have to switch. You don't have to deal with all that paperwork. So how do you actually contact your branch manager? If you have someone at the bank that you talk to already, that's the best person to go to. Maybe someone who helped you with your mortgage, someone that you have contact information for and they know you, that's the best person to go to. If not, you go on their website and you look up how to contact them. For TD, I was able to book an appointment with a client services rep who works in my branch. And I talked to them about my concerns. I told them about the Banking on Climate Change report, which they didn't know about. And I asked them to pass it up to the branch manager. And talking to friends who have worked in banks, I've since learned that you should also be asking the branch manager to pass it up to the district manager. Because the higher up the chain we go, the more likelihood that they will have influence on the actual decisions. So you can say to the branch manager, look, I know you don't set the fossil fuel policies for your bank, but I want you to pass it up to your district manager that many of your customers are concerned with this and thinking of moving to another bank.
So one thing we would like to ask you to do is to sign up on our Action Network page. So the idea here is not that we're going to use your information and sell it or anything like that, but we do want to have a tally of people who are committed to this campaign. Eventually we would like to present this to the media to let them know that, you know, it's not just the one-off individual or the little environmental group that's concerned about this, that this is actually a Canada-wide concern. And the greater the numbers that we have, obviously, the bigger the case we can make. Basically, by putting your name to this, we are going to show them that we are not going to buy into them promising us a greener, sustainable tomorrow while destroying today. Because that just doesn't even make sense. We'll also send you some updates, and we will put the link down below in the description.
So the demands that we're working with are from the bank track, the larger campaign. We asked them that they clarify their position on climate change and the burning of fossil fuels, which they're starting to do now. And more importantly, we asked them to publicly commit to immediately ending your support for all new fossil fuel projects. To me, I think this is the big one. We just can't be building any new fossil fuel projects. We know that even the developed fossil fuel reserves will bring us above 1.5 degrees of warming and almost to 2 degrees warming. And that doesn't include all the proven reserves that have been found that they're hoping to develop in the future. So we absolutely do not have room for any new lending to any new fossil fuel projects. But the demands, of course, are kind of up to you. You might, as Myrtle was talking about, want to have a demand about free and informed prior consent for projects and lending. There's a lot of issues that you might have with your bank, so we want you to think, what is your level of comfort? What is it that will make you stay or leave as a client of their bank? And put that right into your email. We do have email templates on the website as well, if you just want to use one and to make it quicker. So why is the campaign designed like this? Well, part of it is that we're using the bank structure against them. The branch managers are incentivized by the number of accounts and the number of products that they're selling. That's what sets their bonuses. So, you know, if you've just left and gone to a credit union, they might not think more about you. But if they keep hearing, oh, this account, oh, that account, oh, they're going to leave in April, that's going to be something that they're going to start thinking about more, and they're going to be more likely to pass it up the chain. In particular, I was told again by someone who works in the banks that mortgages are really going to scare the banks. So if you have a mortgage, that's the number one thing to put in your ask, is to say that you're looking to refinance your mortgage with a credit union or someone who doesn't have these awful fossil fuel policies. And that's what's really going to get the branch manager's attention. And then the second thing that I think is good about this campaign is that we're making them compete. Because we haven't already switched to a credit union, they're going to start thinking, oh, all these people are looking around, not only at my bank, but probably at the other banks, and we want them to start competing on the issue of their policies. And they already are a little bit. I think that's why you saw the announcement from RBC, the announcement from TD. I think we'll probably see new announcements from the banks. But we have to be clear to them that we're paying attention and that we want something more than that.
So existing alternatives. So if you are thinking about moving your money, we do have a number of institutions that you can have a look at, but these are regional credit unions. So credit unions are great because when you sign up with them, you will become a member by paying a small fee usually. So what that means is you actually have voting power. So you have a say directly on what happens, whereas that doesn't happen with any of the Canadian big banks. So we have listed here some credit unions in different provinces. In Ontario, there's Alterna, Duca, and Kindred. Quebec has many smaller credit unions. BC, Vancity, CCEC, Atlantic, and Prairie is also some small credit unions. So with these, the idea is that you look up the credit union that you're interested in, and each of them has some kind of unique quality to them. So for example, Duca is a B Corp, so there's a commitment to employees and to sort of more ethical policies. Kindred is very upfront on their website. You can see very easily the types of projects that they're committed to. So that's the kind of thing you want to be looking for. So that's what we would recommend right now. They simply do not have the capacity to dole out huge amounts of money for these projects. And when you're talking to credit unions, do ask them about what their policies are. We don't want them to then go ahead and put money into these projects as they grow either. We want to make sure that we're also asking them difficult questions. And do let us know if you find one that is ethical, that is committed to a greener tomorrow, and we can add that to our list of recommendations. Other options, if you wanted to go with a bigger institution, there's Desjardins, HSBC, Laurentian, and Equitable Bank. So these are all maybe slightly better. They score a little bit better, but you do have to prod them. They will advertise their greener options, but in the end, they are still actually not that great. Desjardins has a fund, Société Terra, that's supposedly fossil-free, which is great. However, last we heard, they are still actually funding fossil fuel projects. So you do want to prod them, ask them difficult questions, and don't just take what they say at face value. Make sure you're asking them for very specific very specific policies surrounding the projects that they will contribute to.
Yeah, I just wanted to show, like, HSBC, to highlight how bad the Canadian banks are. HSBC gets a huge amount of protests in Europe about their fossil fuel investments. But what you'll see is that they scored about an 18.5 out of 200 on the Bank Track report. So remember, the Canadian banks were all 3 or below out of 200. So what's an awful bank in Europe is actually like a pretty good bank in Canada, which is why we have a lot of work to do here. So in terms of how to switch, I recommend going to the Sustainable Economist website run by Tim Nash. He's a great, you should also follow him on Twitter. He has a lot of great information about sustainable financing, how to do your investments, ETFs, that kind of thing. But he has a specific guide on how to move your money. You choose the credit union, join, and then you slowly add your bill payees and you transfer your balance, and then you wait a month, which is smart, so that there aren't any surprise things you have to deal with. And if there's no activity in your older accounts for a month, then you can switch. He goes into a bit more detail, but it's a good resource if you're concerned about the actual nitty-gritty of doing the switch. And then the other thing he points out, which is really great, is to remember that all the credit unions, although they're small, they share an ATM network. So if you're a member of one credit union, you'll be able to get transactions at any of the credit union's ATMs. So that's a useful thing to remember. So the big ask, I guess, is that not only do you sign up below, but you reach out to some people and you ask them to sign up as well, because we're a really small organization. We put up this video, we run some webinars, you know, and when we run a webinar, we run it for 20 people and maybe 15 of them sign up. That's great, but we simply don't have the capacity to do the huge outreach that we need. And the other thing we find is that the talking to people, hearing the story of the campaign and why it works, and hearing it from someone you already know is the most effective way. Like, we get a lot of signups from the webinars, but you know, if we tweet about it, we have 2,000 followers or whatever, but we don't get too many signups from that. So it's really that direct connection between you and someone else that will get a few more signups. So you know, make a list of people who might be interested. You don't have to contact them all right away. Go through the ones that you think are the easiest asks and just tell them about the campaign. Maybe ask them to watch this video and ask them to sign up. So the big thing that we want from you is to sign up, of course, and also to help us spread the word about this campaign, because right now we have a couple hundred maybe people signed up, but we're going to need thousands of people to really influence the banks in a significant way. So that's all for us. I hope you enjoyed our little video, and I hope you sign up.
Please share it.